A research study was conducted at the Kansas State University Stocker Unit to evaluate the impacts of limit feeding during the backgrounding phase and to develop an economic framework to measure and quantify the sustainable attributes of limit feeding. Throughout the research trial, 418 calves were allotted to two treatments. One was a higher energy diet that was limit fed, and the other treatment was a lower energy diet that was fed ad libitum, so as much as the calf would eat. Those limit fed calves were restricted to about 85% of the intake of the ad libitum fed calves, and then throughout the trial, performance data, tractor and mixer usage, and delivery time, and health data was collected throughout the trial. And then all of those variables were utilized to build producer budget sheets that compare the cost of each feeding type in the diets fed. These budget sheets are built off of the research conducted at the Stocker unit, but also allows and encourages producers to input their own operation costs as well, so it's representative for their operation. The budget sheet is designed to serve as a barometer to compare the profitability for the backgrounding or stocker sector, to compare the cost and benefits of growing stocker calves through limit feeding or ad lib feeding those cattle. The budget sheets are not intended to represent any one operation, and each individual should input key inputs to reflect their own operation. Those values that are designed to be adjusted for specific operations are denoted in blue. So there are default values in place. Those defaults came through either the research at the Stocker unit or through KFMA values or other research. So there are default values in there, but if it's a blue value, we highly encourage you to go through your records and input those costs specific to your operation. And then the black values are automatically calculated through formulas or other research, and they should not be adjusted. And then there's a feed tab, which I'll show you here in a second, which is the diets utilized throughout the research. If you choose to use a diet other than the diets provided, you can update that information accordingly, and it will update within the respective sheet. So here within the introduction, it just gives you some definitions of what each value represents. So as you're going through your records, thinking through where does this cost get accounted for at, different things like that, and also explains how we got the values that we did. So there's the production efficiency information up at the top, then it goes into gross returns, variable cost, accounting for different costs, and then the fixed cost at the bottom. So to begin, we'll just head over to the feed tab. So here at the top, we have the ad libitum fed diet. So this is the diet, the lower energy diet that was fed for as much as the cattle would eat. So it shows you the ingredient breakdown for the pounds per head per day, the cost per pound for that ingredient, and then finally at the bottom, the total cost per head per day. Again, if you are feeding a different diet, you should update this accordingly and making sure those costs are on a per head basis. And then at the bottom, we have the limit fed diet, so the diet that was restricted and fed at and was a higher energy diet. So you can see the ingredient breakdown from the research trial and the cost per pound, and then ultimately the cost per head per day. So once we have that updated, I'm going to go through a producer example. For example, if someone was sitting across from me and we were thinking about this for their operation. To begin, we'll go through the ad libitum sheet first, so putting in the information that we found throughout the research trial and also inputting those variables that represent each operation into that, and then we'll repeat the process for limit fed cattle. So to begin, we go up here to the top section, which is our production efficiency information. So I'll just go through an example and show you what values you input and how kind of the spreadsheet works, and ultimately how we interpret the results. So to begin, we'll start with death loss. So for this example, the producer has a death loss of about 1.5%. So we change that. They typically background their cattle for 150 days. And they typically manage for an average yearly gain of 2.5 pounds. You can see as we change these values, a lot of the black values are updating as they are formulas that we've set up so they read off of those values that producers change. So we see our hundredweight produce is updated, and then we go into our gross return section. Our feeder animal sale price is based upon the default price is a March steer price, and then the purchase price, this down here, is the default is based upon an October steer price. So you'll want to be sure you are updating those prices based on the time of year you're purchasing cattle, or if you're purchasing heifers, just be aware of that those prices can change, and you should be updating those for seasonality and the type of cattle you're purchasing. So we'll leave that for this example, and then you'll also want to update the weight that you typically purchase those cattle at. So for this example, they typically purchase them at 550 pounds. Update that, and then you'll see that this value changed once we updated that. So that was a formula that doesn't need to be touched, but it is going to update based off of those inputs. So that brings us to our total gross return of $377.55 per head. So then we'll move into variable cost. So the first three lines are all about pasture, crops, harvested forage. So if you're utilizing those resources to background cattle, you'll want to input values there. For this example, the producer doesn't utilize those, they bunk feed, and their cattle are on a lot, so we'll just leave those zeroed out. And then we have the grain, protein, and mineral supplement cost. This feed cost here is, it comes off of the feed tab. So it's directly right into there, so you don't have to update that, it pulls it itself, and then it's multiplied by the days in the backgrounding lot and gives us a feed cost of $154.59 per head for that calf while they're in the backgrounding phase. Then if a producer has any other feed costs, they can include those here. And then the labor wage. So for this example, they have a labor wage of $17, and it's multiplied by a value that was found through previous research that is the labor requirement for stocker cattle. So that gives us a labor cost of $25.50. And then next we have the average precipitation events. So you want to think about the climate that you are raising these cattle in. If you're getting a lot of rain, it's going to require more labor as you're having to clean out those bunks and different things like that. So this producer is estimating about 3 rain events. So we'll input that, and it updates our cost. And then next we have the mix and delivery time of the diets. So as I mentioned in the research, they recorded the times that it took to mix the diets and also to deliver those diets. As we're feeding 2 different diets and feeding them at 2 different volumes, we expect our labor requirement to change. So we update our labor wage here, and then this 0.813 was found through the research, and that's our time that it took to limit feed those cattle. So the limit feeding took a little bit less time to feed. So down here, we have the anticipated increase in time to feed those cattle if we're feeding that ad libitum diet, which is understandable as we are feeding that diet at a higher volume, and also the diet was more forage based, so it was a little bit drier and more stemmier, so it took more time to deliver that. So then that's all calculated together and gives us a cost of $21.96 to mix and deliver feed to that calf throughout the backgrounding period. And then we have our vet medicine costs. So going through the records, this producer found that their vet medicine drug cost is about $9. So we'll change that. Their marketing costs are $10.50. Their utilities, gas, fuel, and oil is $4. And then the manure management cost or revenue. So if you're selling your manure to someone, or if you have to pay someone to come in and clean out your manure and dispose of it, you'll account for that cost here. This producer doesn't have that, so we'll just leave it blank. And then machine, facility, equipment, and repairs. The producer doesn't have this information, so we're just going to utilize the default KFMA value that is presented there. And then we have the tractor mixer time and usage. So this accounts for the cost that it takes to utilize that equipment. So this $46 is the least cost for the tractor and the mixer, multiplied by the limit fed timing, and then the feedings per day. But again, with the ad libitum, we're expecting a little bit more time, so you're increasing those hours spent. So we have that accounted for, giving us a lease cost of $59.43 per head. And then the final two within the variable costs is cash interest paid and other variable cost utilizing the KFMA values that were provided. And then that brings our total variable costs to $304.72 per head. The next section focuses on fixed cost. So first we have depreciation. So this farmer has calculated their depreciation to be $6. Their taxes are $1. Their farm livestock insurance is $1.50. And then the opportunity cost of investment, they have elected to utilize the KFMA value of $18.50, bringing the total fixed cost to $27. So when we add our variable cost and our fixed cost together, giving us a total cost of $331.72 per head. And then finally, we have our income over variable cost of $72.82 per head, and an income over total cost of $45.82 per head. So that's for if we would ad libitum feed those back stocker cattle, and then we just go over to the limit fed sheet and repeat the process, and then compare the two income over total cost just to gauge that profitability and make our decision for our operation. So we'll update death loss to 1.5, days in the backgrounding lot to 150, changing our average daily gain to 2.5. You can see our hundredweight is a little bit higher, and that is due to the anticipated increase in average daily gain. So throughout the research trial at the stocker unit, we found a slight increase in performance for cattle that were limit fed. So we observed an increase in average daily gain of 0.13. So we've accounted for that, and that's going to draw a change in our hundredweight produced, which drives it up a little bit more. And then we have our gross return. Again, we're leaving the feeder sale price and purchase price the same, changing the weight that we typically purchase those calves to 550. Everything else is formula based, so we don't need to touch anything else. And we see a total gross return of $405.75 per head. So a little bit higher than our ad libitum cattle, and that's based off that anticipated increase in average daily gain. Then our next section is variable cost. So again, the first 3 lines, we're just going to leave zeroed out as they don't account for those. Our grain, protein, mineral supplement is all accounted for based off of our feed tab and the days in the backgrounding lot, giving us a total feed cost of $135.32 per head. So slightly less than the ad libitum diet, and that's based off of the difference of the price per head per day. And then we're just leaving that other feed tab zeroed out. Updating the labor wage to $17. Changing the average precipitation events to 3. Changing our labor wage to 17 for this. And you will notice for this one, we don't have that anticipated increase because we're in the limit fed example, and this value right here represents the time that it took to feed that diet. And then updating our vet medicine and drug cost, we've got $9. Our marketing cost at $10.50. Our utilities, gas, fuel, and oil, $4. We have no manure management cost or revenue, so we'll leave that blank. Then machinery, facility, equipment repairs, utilizing the KFMA value of $7. And then our tractor, mixer, time and usage, leaving that as is, accounting for that time to limit feed those cattle and the machinery requirement. And then cash interest paid and other variable costs utilizing the KFMA values provided. When we sum that up, our total variable cost is $255.30 per head. And then we move into fixed costs. So depreciation was $6 for this producer, $1 of taxes, $150 for their farm and livestock insurance, and the opportunity cost investment $18.50. No other fixed cost, giving us a total fixed cost of $27. It's important to note that the fixed cost is the same regardless of the feeding type, as those costs are associated regardless if you're feeding cattle. And then finally, when we sum those up, our total cost is $282.30, giving us an income over variable cost of $150.44 per head, and an income over total cost of $123.44 per head. So from there, when we look at the summary tab, we have all of the total gross return, total variable cost, total fixed cost, income over variable cost, and our income over total cost for ad libitum feeding and limit feeding, and then the difference between the two. So the key thing that producers want to look at here is the difference between our income over total cost for the two feeding types. We see that limit feeding provides more profit for this specific example and this producer than the ad lib feeding at $45.82 compared to limit feeding at $123.44 per head, a difference of $77.62. So for this specific example, we see that it is more profitable for a producer to limit feed given the input costs and their feed costs and the feed ingredients and their labor wage and all those values that we input. We get a better idea of that profitability, and then the producer can make a decision for their operation, weighing all of the costs and benefits. Some key things to think about when working through these budget sheets and making decisions. It's specifically some sensitivity points is going to be the feeder animal sale price and also the purchase price of those cattle. As we potentially see a limit shift, a shift to limit feeding across the industry, we might see some changes in those purchase prices from the feedlot. For example, if we have a huge shift to limit feeding, feedlot operators might start asking some questions of, were these cattle limit fed? And that may make we may expect to see some changes for the price they're willing to pay. So those are things to think about. Producers may be able to catch some benefits if there's only a few of them doing it, but as an industry shifts towards it, those benefits may decrease. So it's really something to think about and take into consideration when evaluating the profitability and comparing the profitability of ad lib feeding stocker cattle and limit feeding stocker cattle.